"Can you make me come?" the mail-order bride asked the virgin cowboy he admitted. The town wasn't much to look at, just a collection of wooden buildings lined up along a dusty road, surrounded by endless miles of scrub and rocky hills. But for Sam, it was home. His family's ranch, tucked away on the outskirts of the town, had been in the family for generations. Yet despite all the open land and wide skies, Sam had never felt more alone. At 26 years old, he was a tall, broad-shouldered man, his hands rough from working the land. His dark brown hair had a bit of a wildness to it, like everything else in his life. He wasn't a stranger to hard work, but life on the ranch wasn't just about toil. It was also about being surrounded by silence. There were no friends to share a drink with at the local saloon, no woman to share his days with, no family except for a distant, aging father who stayed to himself. Sam was, in every way, a man without connection. Every day, he went about his routine of working the fields, mending fences, and taking care of the livestock. There was always something to do, always something to fix. But at the end of the day, when the work was done, Sam would sit on the porch of his small house, looking out at the setting sun and feeling the weight of his loneliness settle over him. He would drink his coffee, savoring the quiet, but knowing deep down that something was missing. It wasn't that Sam didn't try. Over the years, there had been a few women who caught his eye. He'd even had a few dates, but nothing ever came of it. Either they weren't interested, or he couldn't bring himself to open up enough to connect with them. The truth was, Sam didn't really know how to talk to women. He was awkward, unsure of himself, and all he had to offer was his work on the ranch. In a town like Wind River, that was enough for most people, but it never seemed to be enough for a woman who wanted more. That's when he saw it, an advertisement in the local newspaper. It was a simple ad, one that wouldn't have caught his eye if it hadn't been for the desperate feeling that had begun to creep into his heart. "Mail-order brides wanted," it read. Below that, in smaller print, it said, "Seeking women who wish to start a new life in the West." Room, board, and marriage included. The idea of it seemed strange to Sam at first. A mail-order bride. The very thought felt foreign to him. But after days of staring at that one line in the paper, he began to wonder. Could it be the solution he'd been searching for? Sam wasn't sure what drove him to answer the ad. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was desperation. But he sat down, took a pen and paper, and wrote his first letter to a woman he had never met. He told her about his ranch, his life, and how he had been living alone for years. He shared his hopes for the future, how he dreamed of finding someone to share his life with, to build a home and a family. It was the most personal thing he had ever written to a woman, and as he folded the letter, he had an odd mixture of excitement and anxiety swirling inside him. He didn't expect a reply. After all, he had no experience with women, let alone the complicated world of romance. But to his surprise, a few weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. Sam could hardly believe it when he saw the neat handwriting on the envelope. His hands shook as he opened it, unfolding the paper to read the words of the woman who had written back. Her name was Isabella, and she was from a city far away. In her letter, she spoke of her own struggles, how she had lost her family, how she felt trapped in a life that didn't fit her. Like Sam, she was looking for a way out. She had heard about the opportunities in the West and hoped that coming to a place like Wind River could offer her a new beginning. Her words were warm and kind, yet tinged with sadness and uncertainty. She shared with Sam her dreams of finding a man who would treat her well, someone who was strong and reliable, someone who could help her build a life in the West. As Sam read her letter, he felt a deep sense of connection. He could understand her loneliness, her desire for a new start. For the first time in years, he felt that maybe, just maybe, someone else out there understood what he was going through. He didn't know if this woman, Isabella, was the one for him, but he knew that he had to respond. He wrote her back, and over the following weeks, they exchanged more letters. The connection between them grew, and Sam began to imagine what it might be like to have her by his side. Still, there were so many unknowns. What would she be like in person? Would she be disappointed when she saw his modest ranch? Would she be ready to leave everything behind and start over with him? Sam had never even met this woman, and yet he found himself picturing a future together. It was the kind of hope he hadn't dared to entertain in years. When the day finally came that he was to meet her, Sam was both nervous and excited. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew one thing for sure. This was his chance to change everything. This could be the start of something new, something that could fill the emptiness that had haunted him for so long. The stagecoach rolled into town on a warm, sunny afternoon, the horses' hooves clopping on the dusty road. Sam stood near the train station, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what he was supposed to do when she arrived. Would she recognize him? Would she be glad to see him? All these questions buzzed in his mind, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was the moment that would change his life forever. As the coach stopped and the door opened, Sam saw her. Isabella. She was a vision, a woman far more beautiful than he had imagined. She had long brown hair that framed her face softly, and her green eyes glistened with uncertainty and hope. She stepped out of the coach, and for a moment, Sam was frozen. He had never seen someone so striking, so full of life and possibility. She looked just as nervous as he felt, but there was also something else in her eyes, a quiet strength, as if she knew that this was a fresh start, no matter how daunting it seemed. When their eyes met, there was a long pause. Sam didn't know what to say. His tongue felt thick in his mouth, and for a moment he regretted not practicing what he would say to her. But then she smiled. It was a small, tentative smile, but it was enough to make Sam's heart race. It was a sign, he thought, a sign that things could be okay. "Sam?" she asked, her voice soft but sure. He nodded, feeling a bit awkward. "Yes, I'm Sam," he said, his voice cracking slightly. Isabella's smile widened. "It's nice to finally meet you." The words hung between them for a moment, and Sam realized that there was no going back now. Whatever happened from here on out, this was the beginning of something new. He didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt the stirrings of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something beautiful. Isabella stepped down from the stagecoach, the dust swirling around her as the sound of the horses' hooves slowly faded into the background. She glanced around nervously, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. The wide, open sky above seemed to stretch endlessly, and the small town of Wind River appeared so different from the city she had left behind. There were no towering buildings or bustling streets here, just dirt roads and simple wooden houses. It was a far cry from everything she had known. She was relieved to finally be off the long journey that had taken her across miles of wilderness, away from her old life. But now that she was here, standing in front of the man she had been writing to for weeks, she wasn't sure what to expect. Her heart beat a little faster as she looked at Sam, standing awkwardly by the coach, his broad frame casting a long shadow in the afternoon sun. Sam was just as nervous as she was. He had never been good at meeting people, especially not someone he had only spoken to through letters. He had pictured this moment in his mind 1,000 times, how he would greet her, what he would say, but now all his plans seemed to vanish. The words he had prepared felt stuck in his throat. For a long moment they just stood there, both unsure of how to start. Finally, Sam cleared his throat and took a step forward. "You made it," he said, his voice a little more hoarse than he intended. He mentally kicked himself. Was that really all he had to say? But Isabella just smiled, and somehow that made everything feel a little bit easier. "I did," she replied softly, looking him over. There was no denying it. Sam was taller than she had imagined, his dark hair messy from the wind, and his clothes simple, but there was something about the way he stood that made him seem both strong and gentle. He wasn't like the men she had known back in the city. His hands were rough from work, but his eyes held a kindness that made her feel at ease. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her journey settle in her chest. She had left everything behind, her family, her friends, the life she had known, and now she was here ready to start fresh. Sam was the man she had agreed to marry, but still, she didn't know if this was the right choice. Could this simple life on the frontier truly be the one she had been searching for? Sam watched her closely, trying to read her expression. He knew he wasn't much to look at, just a rancher with little more than his land to offer. But he also knew that he had to be honest. He wanted this to work. He wanted to show her that he could be more than just a man on a farm. He could be a husband, someone who would take care of her, someone she could depend on. I hope the trip wasn't too hard," Sam said, trying again. Isabella nodded, taking a small step toward him. "It wasn't easy, but I've made it. This place," she glanced around at the town, then at the wide-open spaces beyond it. "It's very different from where I came from." Sam chuckled, a little nervous. "It sure is." "It's not much, but it's home." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bundle of letters. "I thought you might like to see the ranch," he said, offering them a little awkwardly. I don't know if it's what you expected, but it's a good place. We'll figure it out together. Isabella smiled at the effort he was putting into making her feel welcome. The uncertainty she had been feeling started to fade just a little. She took the letters from his hands, noticing how careful he was, almost as if he feared she might break them. She walked beside him as they made their way through the small town, the air still warm and dry. As they reached the edge of Wind River, the town began to fade behind them, and the sprawling ranch came into view. Sam's land was simple but peaceful. A few cows wandered near the barn, and the distant hills were a comforting shade of green. The fields stretched out in front of them as far as the eye could see, dotted with patches of dry earth and patches of tall, wild grass. It wasn't much, but it was his, and that meant something to him. Isabella took in the view, feeling a bit overwhelmed. She had lived in a city all her life, surrounded by people, noise, and the constant hustle and bustle. The silence of the land here was a stark contrast. It wasn't exactly peaceful yet, but there was a kind of calmness to it, a stillness that made her feel like she could breathe more easily. It was the kind of quiet that felt both comforting and unsettling. "I can see why you like it here," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of her thoughts. "It's beautiful in its own way." Sam smiled, his face lighting up at her words. "It's peaceful, that's for sure. Not a lot of excitement around here, but I think I like it that way." He gave a small shrug, as though to say he didn't mind living quietly, away from the distractions of the world. "We have our work and we have each other. I've always been content with that." Isabella looked at him, her curiosity growing. She could see how much he cared for his land, how much pride he took in it. But there was something more in his eyes, something that told her he wanted more than just this. He wanted to share this life with someone. He wanted to build a family, to share the quiet moments as well as the hard ones. But she wasn't sure if she was ready for all of that. They continued walking toward the house, and as they approached the porch, Isabella felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her once again. She had chosen this life, this new start, but would it be enough? Could she really leave behind everything she had known, the comforts of the city, to live a life of hard work and isolation on the frontier? Sam opened the door and stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter first. "Welcome home," he said with a grin, though his voice trembled a little. She stepped inside, the wooden floors creaking beneath her feet. The house was simple, but there was a warmth to it. A fire burned low in the hearth, and a small table sat in the corner with a few chairs. The furniture was rustic, but it was clean and well cared for. This was where Sam lived. This was his world, and now it was hers too. "Do you like it?" Sam asked, almost nervously. Isabella smiled softly, turning to face him. "It's perfect," she said, meaning it more than she realized. It wasn't perfect in the way she had imagined her life would be, but it was real, and it was hers now too. The loneliness that had haunted her back in the city felt far away here, as if it was something she could leave behind. Maybe this life wouldn't be easy, but it would be hers, and Sam's too. It was the beginning of something new. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but she was ready to find out. The days that followed were filled with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Sam had never been one for excitement. His days had always followed the same routine, filled with the work that kept the ranch running. But now, with Isabella by his side, there was a new energy in the air. She was adjusting to the life here just as he had hoped, but it wasn't easy. The work was harder than she had imagined, and she often found herself exhausted by the end of the day. Still, she didn't complain. She was determined to make this work just as Sam was. Each morning they woke before the sun, the early hours of the day cool and quiet. Sam would head out to tend to the animals, and Isabella would help him, learning the ropes of ranch life bit by bit. She wasn't used to this kind of physical labor. Back home, her life had been filled with the comfort of city living, well-kept homes, stores within walking distance, and plenty of people around. But here, it was all about the land. The dirt beneath her boots, the wind in her hair, the animals to care for, it was nothing like what she had known before. Still, she found herself growing stronger each day. She learned how to milk cows, feed the chickens, and even help with the mending of fences. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and it was something that brought them together. Sam watched her, a quiet admiration growing inside him. He had always respected hard work, and Isabella showed him she could handle it. She was no longer the delicate woman who had arrived with wide eyes and uncertainty. She was becoming someone he could rely on. Her smile, though still shy at times, was brighter now, and the way she carried herself had changed. There was a confidence in her movements now, a quiet strength that he had never noticed before. She wasn't just learning how to manage a ranch. She was learning how to be part of it, to be part of his world. One evening, as they sat on the porch, the sun slipping below the horizon and painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Isabella looked at Sam with a quiet thoughtfulness. The two of them had spent the day working side by side, and though they had made little conversation, there was a feeling of connection that neither of them had fully realized until now. Sam had been patient with her every step of the way, never rushing her, never expecting too much. And in turn, Isabella had come to appreciate that patience. She realized as she watched him now that he wasn't just the man who owned the ranch. He was someone she could trust. Someone she could count on. "You're getting better at this," Sam said, his voice breaking the comfortable silence. He gave her a small smile, the kind that didn't need words to make it meaningful. Isabella chuckled, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I think I'm getting the hang of it," she replied, though there was still a hint of doubt in her voice. She wasn't sure if she would ever be truly comfortable with the ranch life, but the more time she spent here, the more she realized that she was finding her place. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of crickets filling the air, the evening growing cooler around them. Sam stretched his legs out, resting his boots on the wooden porch as he leaned back in his chair. Isabella followed his gaze, looking out over the land that stretched out before them. The hills in the distance were bathed in the soft light of the setting sun, and she could feel the peace of the land settling into her bones. She had always felt like she was searching for something she hadn't been able to put into words. Now she wasn't sure if she had found it, but she felt closer to it than ever before. This life, this quiet, steady rhythm was beginning to feel like home. "I never thought I'd end up here," Isabella said softly, breaking the silence again. "I always thought my life would be different. I thought I'd marry someone from the city, someone who understood the kind of life I had been living." Sam turned his head to look at her, his expression serious. "And now," she hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "Now I'm not so sure. I don't know what I expected, but this feels right. The work is hard, but it's honest, and I can see why you love this place." "I never thought I would, but I'm starting to understand." Sam smiled, a slow, quiet smile that was full of understanding. "It's not for everyone," he said, "but it's for me, and if it's for you too, then that's something special." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment neither of them spoke. There was an unspoken bond forming, a connection that was deeper than just the work they were doing. It was a shared understanding, a growing trust that was starting to blossom between them. But despite this growing closeness, there was still something that Sam couldn't shake. He could feel the walls he had built around himself slowly coming down, piece by piece, but there was still a part of him that held back. He had been on his own for so long that the idea of letting someone in, truly letting them in, was a daunting thought. There were things about himself that he wasn't sure he could share, things he wasn't sure anyone could understand. And Isabella, too, was holding something back. She had come to this place with so many questions, so many uncertainties, and though she felt herself growing closer to Sam every day, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She knew that she was beginning to care for him, but there was still a gap between them, a space that neither of them had yet been willing to cross. She wasn't sure if it was fear or uncertainty that held her back, but something inside her told her that she needed more. She needed to know if what they had could be more than just a partnership for survival. Could they truly become something deeper, something more intimate? The next few days passed in a blur of work and quiet moments, each one a small step forward in their journey together. The ranch was a demanding place, but it was also a place where they could learn to be honest with each other, even when the words didn't come easily. Sam continued to show Isabella the ropes, guiding her through the work, patiently teaching her everything he knew. And slowly she started to understand not just the ranch, but Sam himself. One afternoon, after a long day of work, they sat together again on the porch, the night settling in around them. The stars above were bright and clear, and the cool evening air was a welcome relief from the heat of the day. Isabella leaned back in her chair, her eyes on the stars. "You know," she said after a while, "I never really paid attention to the stars before." "They're so different out here." Sam followed her gaze, his eyes narrowing as he looked up. "Yeah," he said quietly, "they look different out here. In the city, the lights hide them. Out here, you can see everything." Isabella smiled softly. Maybe that's how it is with everything, she said. Sometimes we need to leave behind what we know to see things more clearly. Sam looked at her then, really looked at her, and in that moment he realized something. Maybe this life wasn't just about the ranch. Maybe it was about more than the work and the long days under the sun. It was about the quiet moments, the shared silence, the simple understanding that came from working together. It was about trust, about letting someone in, even when you weren't sure you were ready. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, he didn't feel so afraid of it. With Isabella by his side, maybe they could build something together, something that was more than just a life on the ranch. Maybe, just maybe, they could build something that was truly theirs. The days seemed to stretch on, and yet, time felt like it was moving faster than ever. Sam and Isabella had settled into a rhythm. The mornings were still early, the air crisp and cool, as they worked together on the ranch. The long hours of labor, feeding the animals, repairing fences, and tending to the fields, slowly became less daunting for Isabella. With each passing day, she grew more comfortable in this new life, finding a sense of purpose and pride in the work they did together. She no longer felt like a stranger in this wild, untamed place. Slowly, it was starting to feel like home. But despite the comfort of their routines, Isabella found herself grappling with something deeper, something she couldn't quite put into words. There was a growing tension between her and Sam, one that neither of them had fully addressed. They had grown close and the connection between them was undeniable, but there was still an unspoken distance between them. It was more than just the work they shared. It was something inside her, a longing that she couldn't ignore. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden light over the ranch, Isabella stood by the fence, looking out at the land stretching before her. Sam was inside, finishing up some chores before they would have dinner together. The silence of the evening was soothing, but for Isabella it felt heavy. Her thoughts kept circling back to something she had been avoiding, the unspoken question that had been growing inside her since the day she arrived. She wasn't sure what to do with her feelings. Sam had been kind and patient with her, and she admired him for it. But there was something about the way he held back, something he hadn't yet shared with her. She didn't know what it was, but it kept her up at night, her mind spinning with questions. As she stood there, lost in thought, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Sam appeared, walking toward her with his usual quiet confidence. He was wiping his hands on his trousers, his face set in a thoughtful expression. There was something about the way he moved, the way he carried himself, that made Isabella feel both safe and uncertain at the same time. "Isabella," Sam called softly, his voice breaking through her thoughts. "Everything okay?" She turned to face him, offering him a small smile. "Yeah, just thinking." Sam took a few steps closer, stopping a few feet away from her. He was still a little awkward around her sometimes, unsure of how to act. He wanted to be close to her, wanted to show her that he was there for her, but something always seemed to hold him back. "What about?" he asked, his brow furrowed in concern. Isabella hesitated for a moment. She had spent so much time trying to convince herself that everything was fine, that she didn't need to worry about these things. But now, standing there with Sam, she realized she couldn't keep avoiding it. "I've been wondering about something," she began, her voice soft but steady. "Something I can't seem to shake off." Sam looked at her, his expression unreadable. He took a deep breath, trying to prepare himself for whatever was coming. There had been something on Isabella's mind lately. He could feel it, but he wasn't sure what it was. He was afraid to ask, afraid that it might be something he couldn't answer. "What's that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Isabella looked at him, her gaze steady but uncertain. "Do you ever wonder if this life we're building here will be enough?" Sam blinked, caught off guard by the question. He had never thought about it that way. To him, the ranch had always been enough. It was his life, his work, and now, with Isabella by his side, it felt like it could be something more. But he hadn't stopped to think about her side of it, the part of her that might still be searching for something more. "I don't know what you mean," Sam replied carefully, his voice thick with emotion. "I've always believed that hard work and a good life are enough, and I think that's all we need." Isabella shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. "I know you do, and I admire that about you. But it's not just about the work, Sam. It's about us, about what this is and what it could be. I don't know if I'm ready to just be a part of this life without knowing more, without knowing what you really want." Sam felt a wave of confusion wash over him. He had never been good at expressing his emotions, and he was starting to realize that maybe he had been holding back more than he realized. He had always been focused on getting the work done, on making sure everything was in its place, but he had never really thought about what he wanted from this relationship. He wanted Isabella, but did she want him in the same way? "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Isabella turned her gaze back to the horizon, her eyes lost in the fading light. "I don't know, I guess I'm just afraid. I came here thinking I was ready for this life, but now I'm not so sure. I know you care for me, Sam. But I don't know if that's enough. I need more than just companionship. I need to know that this is what we both want." Sam's heart raced as he processed her words. He hadn't realized how much he had taken for granted. He had been so focused on the land, on the work, on building a life that he hadn't stopped to think about what Isabella needed. She wasn't just here to work beside him. She was here to build a life with him. The silence between them grew, heavy and thick with unspoken thoughts. Sam took a step forward, closer to her. "Isabella, I never meant to make you feel like you were just here. I want you here with me. But I know I've been holding back. I don't know how to be the kind of man you might want, but I'll try. I'll try to give you more than just this. If you're willing to try too." Isabella turned to face him, her expression softening. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability that he had been hiding. He wasn't just the man who worked the ranch. He was a man who had the potential to be so much more. He wanted to be more. "I want to believe that," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I want to believe that this can be more than just a life on a ranch. I want us to be something real." Sam nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest. "We will be," he said quietly. "I promise you that." For a moment they just stood there, the world around them still and quiet. The stars were beginning to twinkle overhead, and the air had grown cooler. But for the first time, the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of something deeper, a connection that had been waiting to bloom and was now starting to do so. Isabella smiled then, a soft, genuine smile that made her eyes sparkle. "Thank you," she said, "for being willing to try." Sam smiled back, his heart feeling lighter than it had in a long time. "We'll figure it out, together." And in that moment, both of them knew that whatever came next, they were ready to face it. Not as two people trying to make a life work, but as two people who had found something worth fighting for. The days continued to roll by, and the rhythm of life on the ranch began to feel natural. There was something comforting about it, something steady and reliable. The sun still rose early, and the work never stopped. But now there was an unspoken understanding between Sam and Isabella. They had come to understand each other in a way they hadn't before, more than just as partners in work, but as partners in life. Their bond had deepened, and with each passing day, they found new ways to trust each other. Sam had always been a man of few words. He had never been one to openly share his feelings, but now, with Isabella by his side, he began to find it easier. They would sit together after a long day, their backs resting against the porch railing, watching the sky turn from gold to purple as the stars appeared one by one. They didn't need to speak all the time. The quiet moments shared between them had become something precious. There were moments when Sam would catch her looking out at the horizon, her brow furrowed as if she were deep in thought. He would watch her, wondering what was going on in her mind, but he had learned not to push her. Isabella had always been independent, and while she had come to appreciate the quiet, steady life on the ranch, there were times when he could see the hint of longing in her eyes, a longing for something more than just the work. He wasn't sure what it was, but he could feel it in the way she carried herself sometimes. He knew she wasn't completely satisfied yet, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he was missing. One evening, after they had finished working for the day, they sat together on the porch. The sky above them was clear, and the cool breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and earth. The quiet of the evening was soothing, but there was a tension in the air that neither of them could ignore. "I've been thinking," Isabella said softly, breaking the silence. Sam turned his head to look at her. "About what?" She paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "About us, about everything." Sam felt his stomach tighten. He wasn't sure if she was having second thoughts about the life they had built together. He had never been good at talking about his feelings, and the idea of losing her, of her deciding this life wasn't what she wanted, was something he couldn't bear to think about. "I know I've been quiet about a lot of things," Isabella continued. "But I've been thinking a lot about what we have. I've realized that I don't just want a life here, I want a future here with you." Sam's heart seemed to skip a beat at her words. He hadn't expected her to say that. He had always known she cared for him, but hearing her speak like that, about a future about them together, was more than he had dared to hope for. "You really mean that?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "You want to stay here with me?" Isabella nodded, her eyes meeting his with a sincerity that made his heart swell. "Yes, I've come to realize that this life, this ranch, it's more than just the land. It's about what we're building together, and I want to build it with you." The weight that had been pressing on his chest lifted, and for the first time in a long while, Sam felt a sense of relief. It was a quiet relief, but it was there. They had both been afraid of what the future might hold, but now, in this moment, everything seemed clear. Isabella wasn't just here to work alongside him. She was here to be a part of his life, to make this place a home for them both. For a while, neither of them spoke. They simply sat there, taking in the moment. The stars above them twinkled brightly, and Sam couldn't help but smile as he looked at the woman beside him. Isabella had been through so much to get to this point. She had left everything behind, the city, her family, the life she had known, and come to a place that was completely unfamiliar. But she had never complained. She had never turned away from the work or the challenges. She had taken it all in stride, and now she was standing beside him, saying she wanted to stay. It was everything he had ever hoped for and more. "I'm glad you're here," Sam said, his voice low but full of meaning. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Isabella smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I'm glad I'm here too. It feels like this is where I'm meant to be, with you." The connection between them was undeniable, and as the evening stretched on, Sam found himself thinking about the future in a way he never had before. He had always been focused on the day-to-day, on getting the work done and taking care of things. But now, with Isabella by his side, he could see a future, one where they weren't just surviving but living. It wasn't going to be easy. Life on the ranch would always be a lot of hard work. There would be challenges and struggles ahead. But for the first time, Sam felt ready to face them. Together, they could make it through anything. The following days passed in a blur of activity. The ranch continued to thrive, and Sam and Isabella's partnership grew stronger. They worked side by side, each day bringing them closer, their bond solidifying with every task they completed together. But there were other moments, too, moments when they would sit together after work, watching the sun set, or when they would talk long into the night about their hopes and dreams. The simple, quiet moments became the foundation of their relationship. And slowly, as the months went by, Sam began to realize something he hadn't fully understood before. That love wasn't just about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about the small things, the way they supported each other, the way they shared their lives, their hopes, and their fears. It was about the quiet understanding that came from working side by side and building something together. One day, as they worked in the fields, Sam turned to Isabella with a smile. "You know, I think we're doing it," he said. "We're building something real here." Isabella stopped for a moment, looking at him with a warm smile of her own. "Yeah, I think we are." They stood there for a moment, side by side, taking in the vast landscape around them. It was simple, yes, but it was theirs. It was real. And for the first time in a long time, Sam knew with certainty that he wasn't alone. With Isabella by his side, he had everything he needed. Together, they would build a life, not just on this ranch, but with each other. It wouldn't always be easy, but it would be worth it. And that was enough. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting its golden light over the land, Sam reached out, taking Isabella's hand in his. She squeezed it gently, and for a moment everything felt just right. They were ready for whatever came next.